All right, well, let me say welcome, everybody, to the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Humanities Center. We are honored to have for our last My Path to Leadership session of the academic year our outgoing president, Dr. Alex Johnson. I will not properly introduce him because my job here is to say thank you for coming and to introduce Olu Ogunlade. Did I get it that time, Olu? Close enough? Thank you so much. Well, thanks for being here, Olu. I'm going to turn it over to him as our MC, and he'll introduce our interviewer and our esteemed guest as soon as he comes over here. Olu, that was your cue. Thanks, Olu.
Hi, everyone. I am Oluwasegun Ogunlade, and I'm a nursing major student, an international student, Robert Lewis Scholar, Mandel Scholar, and the current president-elect student government at Metro Campus. And I'm here to introduce my colleague, Herman, and Dr. Alex, the president, Cuyahoga Community College. I have a lot to say about Dr. Alex because I listened to a couple of his videos, and I've seen him talked about so many things that he has said about leadership. And there is one thing he said at the City Club of Cleveland event, and that really captured my attention, where he talked about preparing a shoulder to carry the future leaders. Because Isaac Newton said something. He said, if I'm able to see further, if I'm able to go further, it's because I'm standing on the shoulder of the giants. And today we have Dr. Alex as a giant that we can stand on, that we can leap on to go further in life and as leaders. Permit me to read a citation from this paper. He has a lot that I have to talk about, but I will just be guided by this paper. So, Dr. Alex became Tracy's fourth full-time president in July 2013, and in June of his year, he will retire from his post. Under Dr. Johnson's leadership, Tracy renewed its commitment to providing educational access through Northeast Ohio. He has overseen an era of increasing graduation rates at the college, as well as the establishment of Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Humanities Center, where we are seated right now. Today, there are just a couple of many of his accomplishments, just like I said the other time, that we can read. And Dr. Johnson's tenure as Tracy president has been the culmination of a 40 years career in higher education. He has a lot to give to us. Prior to leading Tracy, he served as president of the Community College of Allegheny County in Pittsburgh and chancellor of Delgado, pardon me for pronouncing that, Delgado Community College in New Orleans. He also previously served as president of Tracy Metropolitan Campus. Dr. Johnson is the author of 2 books on leadership, and we hope he will share from some insight from some of the books in his comment today. Herman, I will turn it over to you to begin our conversation with Dr. Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you very
You
much.
can say that.
All right. You get seated. And I do want to mention to students that we will be having a Q&A session afterwards, so I hope we can prepare some questions for Dr. Johnson after this interview. So first, I'd like to thank you all for being here. This is truly my distinct honor in presenting this interview. So as Olu mentioned, my name is Armand Salderdak. I am a second-year student here at Tri-C and a Mandel Scholar studying business. And I'm very excited to be talking with you today, Dr. Johnson, so thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
So to start, I would like for you, just for us to get to know you a little better, talk about your background, so your upbringing, if you can.
Oh, I'd be glad to. And by the way, thank you so very much for that that very generous and humbling introduction. Um, as was summarized in the information that was shared to you, I have had going on a 45-year career in higher education as a faculty member and an administrator. I earned a doctorate from Penn State University a long time ago, and following that, I served on the faculty at Bowling Green State University. How many of you have heard of Bowling Green? Served on the faculty there in the area of special education. My desire was to help developmentally delayed preschool children reach their optimal potential. So I did a lot of research and I developed a lot of ways to assess and evaluate where young children were developmentally using different scales and what have you. And then to prescribe some type of intervention to ensure that they were able to grow and develop fully. I also went back to my alma mater, Winston-Salem State University, where I was an undergrad and served on the faculty there. Once again, in the Department of Special Education, with a focus on preschool children. As I did my work, I was comfortable teaching and writing and researching and doing the kinds of things that faculty members normally do. And the president came to me one day out of the blue and he said, you know, Dr. Johnson, I would like very much for you to serve in an interim role as an administrator. Assistant Vice Chancellor, Vice President for Academic Affairs. And I said, why in the world do I want to do that? Here got it made, you know, I'm teaching 9 months out of the year. I have all my summers off. But I thought about it because I felt in that capacity I might have a greater impact on ensuring that students got what they need in order to be successful. And I did it. And the one thing that worried me about the whole opportunity was that I found myself working past 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's not a put down of our faculty. It's just that our class schedule was that way. I spent many more hours, as I know your teachers do, engaged in office hours and advising and doing the types of things that really augment the classroom experience for you. And I loved that work. But I found as an administrator that I could really do more to promote the experience that students got at my institution. So I served in that role for 3 years, and a new president came in, and he asked me to serve as his executive assistant. And during that time, I also became a fellow with the American Council on Education, and what that did was really broaden my horizons and gave me an opportunity to look more fully at leadership and administrative responsibilities in higher education. As I worked in that position, I received many, many calls to compete for presidencies because that's the logical next step, or would have been for me. But as I considered my option, the one that appealed to me most was the presidency at the Metropolitan Campus of Cuyahoga Community College. I had gained a healthy regard and respect for students who earned their associate degrees and came to us to complete their baccalaureate degrees. They were smart, they were dedicated, they were committed to their studies, they, in some instances, worked, they realized that they had to balance not only their lives, but also their educational experiences, and they did a really good job. I got a call one day from Carol Cartwright, who was the president of Kent State University at the time and my former doctoral advisor, and she said, there's a new president at Cuyahoga, and she has a job opening as president of her metropolitan campus. Would you be interested in it? And I thought about it, and I came up and I interviewed, and the rest is history. I spent 11 years as the president of Metro, and then as was indicated in the introduction, I spent 5 years at Delgado Community College in New Orleans, and that was during Hurricane Katrina. And that's a whole story in and of itself. I raised $60 million to help that institution recover following a natural disaster that essentially inundated that community and took lives along with it. And then following that stint at Delgado, I became the president of the Community College of Allegheny County. For presidencies, I was set. I said, no more of this. I'm not doing this anymore. This is where I'm going to retire. Lo and behold, I get a call 2 years before Dr. Thornton retires, asking me would I consider coming back to Cuyahoga Community College as the college president. I said, no, I don't really want to do that. I'm set here. But a strange thing happened, and they happened to be called grandbabies. So we had little Ruby, and we were close to her. They live in Chesterland. How many of you have heard of Chesterland? They live in Chesterland. We were close to Ruby. Lo and behold, my daughter-in-law gets pregnant again. I said, why would you do that? She said, make sure you had a grandson, and we had a grandbaby, Rory. He's 8 years old now. He'll be 9 in June. And it dawned on me that if I did become president of Cuyahoga Community College, 3 things would happen. It would bring me back to a community I love. It would get me back closer to an institution that I watched thrive during the 9 years that I was away. And it brought me closer to my grandbabies. So as I approach retirement, it's bittersweet, but it's time for new blood to come in and build on a foundation of excellence that we have together established over the last decade, where the results have been remarkable. Increased graduation rates, increased graduation numbers, increased retention rates, beautiful facilities like the Mandel Center, pass rates on levies in almost the 70% range, and the list goes on and on and on. So a lot of things have transpired and been attained during the time that I have been here, and allowed me to build on the foundation of a formidable leader in Dr. Jerry Stu Thornton, whose footsteps I still am not able to fill. So that's my higher education history, but I grew up in a little segregated town of Concord, North Carolina. That's where I was born and raised in part. And in that town, black folk and white folk were separated. I lived in a community called Logan. And in that community, we had separate schools, we had separate libraries, we had separate churches, and we had separate recreational facilities. So, and they were all second rate. You know, there was this whole thing about separate but equal, but they were never separate but equal. And I would pick up a textbook, and that textbook would be handed down from another school. And it would be used over the course of years, and you'd see 10 names listed in that textbook. Or I would go to a library that was probably the size of this room, and get books to read. Or I would go to our little diminutive swimming pool that could only accommodate 25 or 30 people at a time. And it was particularly challenging during the sweltering hot days of the summer. And then in my church, if you know the tradition of religion in the black community, only black folk attended that church. But let me tell you something about that. And this is one of the things I do want to share with you today about how you approach life and leadership. I discovered knowledge in those hand-me-down textbooks, those tattered and threadbare textbooks that gave me an opportunity to become knowledgeable about things that were far outside of the reach of my little small Logan community. I was able to read books in that library that allowed me to join the world of ideas and the life of the mind. I frolicked with friends in that little pool, and I learned how to develop both personally and socially. And in that church, I got spiritual guidance from a community whose ultimate goal was to make sure that even in that environment of exclusion and separation, we got the best experiences that we could possibly get so that people like me could move further. And if there was ever an opportunity where society became equal, that I would benefit from that through that experience that I had in Logan. And what I've learned from that is that in every challenge, there's what? There's opportunity. And so when we were dealing with Hurricane Katrina, it was catastrophic. But what we gained from that was that students needed an experience supplemented by the personal touch. And we benefited from that, and we learned a great deal. The same thing with COVID. It's challenging, but out of that came an opportunity for us to be innovative about instructional delivery. It allowed us to promote access to the institution in ways that we didn't even fathom. And it gave us an opportunity to recognize that we could reallocate resources to accommodate our most pressing needs in ways that we weren't able to do before. So all of that now is we call that our transformation plan, and all of that now is being incorporated in our strategic plan of the institution. So I learned that. And I know you're going to get to this once I stop talking.
Yeah.
You want me to stop talking now?
You tell me if.
No, you're the moderator. Come on, man.
That is true. But then again,
you have other questions.
what
right?
you're saying is fascinating. So, of course, we'd love for you to continue. But yes, thank you for helping me out in my job. I'll take that. But yes, I was going to sort of take that experience and have you talk about the pandemic and the profound effects that it has had for campus life and for your legacy. So can you speak about the lessons that you've drawn from the campus leading us through the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, in a little bit more detail than what I just shared. But we turned on a dime to ensure that students who were in classes in a physical setting could actually continue in those classes virtually. And so we equipped our faculty with the appropriate technology. We equipped them with the appropriate techniques to deliver instruction in that environment. And we also made an effort to ensure that students that did not have access to technology received access to technology. Initially, we did not have Wi-Fi, how many of you have those little Wi-Fi boxes? Just one of y'all? Okay, the rest of y'all are rich. Y'all got Wi-Fi. I wish I had one of those. But we didn't have those Wi-Fi boxes. So students would actually drive to the campuses and park in the parking lots and gain access to our Wi-Fi in that way. The other thing that we did was we had to provide 24/7 services for students that would augment their instructional experience, tutoring and things of that sort. And we also made provisions for students to receive the type of emotional support that was necessary for them to not only deal with the pandemic in their studies, but also their personal engagements. The other thing that we did was fortify our access centers. How many of you have heard about access centers or seen our access centers? Okay. We developed those more fully, so if individuals needed to connect to the campus in any way, shape, or form, they could actually do that within their communities. And the other thing that we did, among the other things that we did, was really fortify our workforce development area to offer more short-term training opportunities so that individuals could take those over a specified period of time, sometimes between 8 and 12 weeks, and earn multiple credentials. And each one of those prepared them to take on meaningful work that provided a family-sustaining wage. So those are the things that we actually learned that are now being integrated in our overall organizational structures and programs, and being incorporated in our strategic plan. So when you think about leadership, sometimes things aren't always etched. You have to think creatively about how you respond to a particular situation. I think we're able to do that a little bit more comfortably and a little bit more nimbly because we had already in place a continuous improvement model using this approach that I talk about in Change the Lapel Pin and also capturing change, called the uninterrupted cycle of leadership effectiveness. We began that in earnest when I first came to the institution. We recognized we had some serious issues with student success. We worked hard to change that using this approach, and it served us steadfastly, quite honestly, during the pandemic.
Great. Well, thank you for that shorter answer.
Okay.
Let's keep it rolling. All right.
Yes.
So your stewardship in this program has been significant in this, partnering with the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Foundation and forming this Humanities Center, which we are all beneficiaries of. So, of course, we want to thank you. I would like for you to speak to why this program is so important, and having to do with leadership. So tying the topic back to leadership, why is this program so important to you at Tri-C?
For a lot of reasons, but principal among them is the fact that I always believe that a community college ought to be a connector to our neighborhoods, and that where appropriate, we convened groups and individuals to deal with our most pressing problems. At the time, Tri-C did not have a mechanism for doing that. So as I thought about the most appropriate application in the community college, it became the Humanities Center, where students like you are the core of our outreach and engagement in the community. And as you learn how to do that, you also continue with your education to the extent that you are able to earn your degrees, but at the same time get that experience in the community that makes you, for lack of a better term, a more informed and better citizen. And that you recognize that your role and responsibility is not only to yourself, but to where you live. So I felt that this was a good way to do it. The other thing that we felt was important was that we would hope that we needed a place or a mechanism for hosting individuals and organizations that would come together and learn how to respond to challenges that might be evident in their communities. And the first thing that we did, the first program that we did in that regard was the year-long celebration of Carl and Lewis Stokes back in 2017. I didn't know how this thing was going to work out. But it turned out to be one of the most monumental and successful efforts that I have ever been a part of. So this year-long celebration took a look at the things that Carl Stokes, in particular, wanted to do during his term as mayor, around education, around safety and security, around housing, and other areas as well. And then we began to think about, okay, so how can we as a community address those concerns now? I think we did a tremendous job of bringing together 100 different groups that had over 55 activities throughout the course of that year, including Cleveland Orchestra, businesses, different community groups and organizations, and we created a policy document that allowed us to look at these things for the foreseeable future. How many of you know where the History Center is, the Cleveland History Center? How many of you have ever been there? In the Cleveland History Center, there is a permanent exhibit recognizing the work of Carl and Lewis Stokes, along with videos and all of the different things. And that was a direct outgrowth of that year-long celebration, because we wanted to do something that recognized permanently their contributions. So we were very, very proud of our work. So that's and it was hosted by the Mandel Humanities Center. Our dean's predecessor, Dr. Lauren Anke, was the one who kind of headed that up. How many of you ever heard of Dr. Anke? She was with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and gave up that gig to come over here and really began in earnest the development of the Mandel Center. And in effect, you're carrying on her legacy under the leadership of Dr. Jordan.
Great. And I will say, the experiences we have, as well as being here, it's really been something we've cherished. So we truly do thank you.
Yeah. Well, you have to thank the Mandel Center Foundation too, because they gave us $10 million. I tried to get 12, but I did the best I could. $10 million endowment to fund in perpetuity the center and some other things, and then an additional $4 million for the Mandel Continuing Scholars Program. So when you complete your education here, you get a free ride where? Cleveland State, in any of those areas that you want to. Now, you have to be part of the Honors College, am I correct?
Part of the Honors College.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then we just received a commitment of, I think, of $1.3 or $5 million, $1.4 million for the
Humanities Academy.
right, that program. And just recently, I heard from the president of the foundation, and he's using all of what we do as a model to affect transformation in other community colleges as well. So it's good work. This is a national program. Your advisory committee is made up of folk from across the nation, including people that I get a chance to only admire. Great folk.
Thank you for that. I'd like to touch on some fun questions.
It's about time. My goodness gracious.
It's already been fun enough.
She got the last question, so.
Yes, we will.
Why don't you just categorize the fun ones and let me choose what I want to, okay. Okay.
It's your show. You tell me, like I said. But no, I would like to know, in particular, if you've had experiences that have led to the best and or the worst advice that you have ever received.
I give myself the worst advice in the world, so that ought to answer it. But No, I haven't. Part of my leadership model is the three essentials, okay? Education, experience, and exposure. So what I try to do is emulate the behavior of people that I admire. So when you do that, it's difficult for you to go wrong. I think what you have to do is practice what I call fortitude and courage. And it's not that you always have fortitude and courage, it's that you seek out people who have fortitude and courage, and then you steal from them. They're good at ideas and examples, just like with the exposure. So, no, I have not benefited. No, I'm good.
Okay.
No.
We'll go to the next one then.
Sure.
So we can talk just briefly about your book, about changing the lapel pin back to leadership. You did in the book you did explain more so the three essentials of leadership.
Right.
Like you mentioned. Could you talk more about how you see Tri-C students in that way? So how do you see Tri-C being that form of leadership?
That's a good question. So in Change Lapel Pin, I introduced the model, but it's refined in capturing change. So let me tell you how it's refined or modified. There's the three essentials of leadership, but they don't act alone in developing what I call a leader of transformation. Not a transformational leader, there's a difference, a leader of transformation. Because along with that are some other qualities that you need. For example, you need to be technically astute. You need to know how to form a vision, strategic plan. You need to know how to assess that. The other thing that you need is emotional intelligence. You need emotional intelligence because what that does is allow you to work with groups and individuals at a personal level. That's critically important. Now, you have to be careful because you got to know what your emotional IQ is, or EQ, emotional quotient, or whatever you call it. You have to know what that is because you might be strong in some other areas and weak in others. You want to concentrate on the strong ones. The other thing is about authenticity, the ability to relate to people at a meaningful level, and sometimes practice leadership not just from the head, but from your heart, okay? Because leadership is not a set of books that you put on the shelf, and when you have an issue, you pull it out and read in there and see what you need to do. This model that I propose allows you to do that, particularly when you incorporate all of the elements. And I think the last piece is looking and acting like a leader. Demonstrating that you know what you're doing, demonstrating that you are open to advice and counsel, showing that you regard others, and sometimes giving up the leadership role when there's someone else who's more astute, and in some instances smarter than you are. How many of you are able to do that? Okay. All right. And then all of that together makes you a leader of transformation, and your responsibility is to create systems of transformation that live on and on and on and on beyond the time that you are no longer a leader. Let me give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about, and I think we might be on our last question. How many of you ever heard of Starbucks? Okay. Okay, so Starbucks was founded by this guy named Howard Schultz back in the 1980s. He actually distributed, what do you call espresso machines. That was his thing. So he sold them for this company, and he ran into these two guys that had Starbucks. And he quit his job, and he went to work for them, right? So he learned from them. He went to Italy. He started a little string of Starbucks. He didn't call them that at the time. But they were basically places where people could get up in the morning and get a cup of espresso. And what he learned from that experience is that coffee was a way for people to develop them, to get together socially and to experience experience life together over a cup of coffee that smelled good, by the way. So he came back and he bought that company from those two guys for $3.4 million. And now Starbucks is worth like $87 billion or even more than that. Howard Schultz was considered a transformative leader. There's a difference. A transformative leader is concerned about the here and now and more about the development of the individuals around them. But he was not a leader of transformation. And let me tell you why. When he left this company, he didn't leave behind a legacy. So the person who came after him got rid of, they didn't grind their coffee anymore. They used these these sealed bags. They brought in breakfast foods that took over the coffee aroma that you smell in Starbucks. The Wi-Fi became faulty. And what was the last thing? The customer experience got really bad. Because in Starbucks, Howard Schultz's design is for the gratification of the baristas as well as the company. A barista created the Frappuccino. Did you know that? He got paid for it. This guy's sitting in Hollywood with the house with the swimming pool that surrounds it. And so he had to come back and lift the company up. He had to come back a third time. So now the person who replaced him is building on his legacy. He started out as a leader of transformation. He became a leader that created a system of transformation. So now that his legacy is being upheld and all of the things that he did with that company are ingrained, institutionalized. So that's what you want to become. You want to become that person who that over time creates a culture that is sustained and really benefits individuals in ways that you could not imagine. So that's the difference.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you got it. No
Yes,
problem.
this has been, like I said, a privilege of mine. Of course, we want to thank you for the legacy that you have left us. We wish you all the best in your retirement.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Now we will turn it over to Olu. This is for the Q&A session, so thank you.
All right. Thank you, Herman. And thank you, Dr. Johnson, for your time. And it's a privilege for us to learn from you. And right now, I will ask my question. I have a question that I want to ask you.
Okay.
Before I turn it to my colleagues. Seated right here, we have a lot of leaders, Mandel scholars that are doing a lot of great things already, and they still want to know. Okay, personally, I want to ask you, what is the greatest challenge that you faced in this course of overseeing in your leadership or in your career generally? You know, what is the greatest challenge that you face, and how did you tackle that? Because I know each and every one of us at one point in time or other, we are overwhelmed by this, and we don't know where to turn to or how to handle it. So then, after answering that, I will turn it to my colleagues.
And I'm going to be quick because I've answered this question before. There are two great challenges that I've faced as a leader. There are many others, but I consider them small in comparison to the bigger ones. The first is Hurricane Katrina, and then, of course, the second is the COVID-19 pandemic. The difference between the two is that with Hurricane Katrina, you could see an end, and we could build. We anticipated a time when we could go back and rebuild not only our community but our institution. It took a while, but we got it done. The difference between the pandemic is the unknown. People use the word post-pandemic. I don't use that term. I use the term new normal because I know that the pandemic is going to change life to the extent that you don't experience even over a decade or two. So those have been my greatest challenges. And the biggest issue with the pandemic is that you have to be on top of everything. In some instances, you can't delegate that responsibility to somebody else. You have to be really, really hands-on because the pandemic has made society very, very skittish, very fragile. And so a leader, you have to exude a type of in-charge attitude that you just don't normally have to. So on May 15th, masks are optional. What happens if we get a spread in COVID-19? Well, I had to anticipate all of that and what we would do in the event that happens. We worked hard to encourage not only our college community, but the community in general to get vaccinated. And I did a video to showcase my experience getting vaccinated at Caroline's, which has been a great partner of ours because I recognize how important that is. And we had to pull together an emergency response team in order to accommodate the changes that we made in rapid succession. And we still meet. That team does. At least 3 times a week at 9 o'clock in the morning just to talk about the kinds of things that are pressing. And COVID-19 continues to be one of those. What I'd like to see this coming fall semester, and we're working toward that, is a fuller restoration of on-ground programs and services and classes for students, including athletics, student leadership and government programs, student leadership and governance programs, and also engagement in the community through some of our different efforts that we had to eliminate because of COVID-19. So that's where we are now. But this has been my greatest challenge. And my retirement date, by the way, was last year. And of course, I postponed it. The board allowed me to do that in order to deal with some of the concerns that we were experiencing. And as a result of that, I feel more comfortable taking my retirement now because I believe we have in place the kinds of things that we can implement in the event we have this challenge or this experience on an ongoing basis. But my sense is that I think we're turning the corner on it.
Thank you, sir. So I don't know if you have any question. You can just raise your hand and I will pass the mic. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Steve Primo. I really appreciated what you had to say about transformational leadership, and I'm wondering about when you're like structuring an organization or something like that, how much of it is injecting your behavior patterns and the kind of values that you want into it, or how much would you say is structural and kind of written into the rules and things like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My model allows for both, quite honestly. I don't think there's any leader who does not insert him or herself personally into their leadership style. Some leaders would not want to do that, but I think it creates an issue when you give up all your personal attributes in order to accommodate a leadership style. I just don't believe that you can do that. That's why my leadership approach really focuses on those 3 essentials of leadership: plus all of the other things, the technical skills, the emotional intelligence, and the authenticity, and I call it those personal attributes like acting like a leader. So I don't think you can separate the two. It takes both of them, quite honestly.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So I had two quick questions. So
Sure.
what's your number one piece of advice that you can give to us? And then also a fun one is, what's your favorite memory at Tri-C?
I got a lot of memories at Tri-C, quite honestly, because I'm in my, oh my God, this is my 25th year here, collectively. But the one piece of advice is that you follow your heart. You can relate to people in ways that you would not believe if you when you connect to them personally. So I make it a point, and I don't do this because I think it's self-serving. I just do it because it's me. To know you, to know your family, your children's names and what they're doing and different things like that. For two reasons. Number one, it makes your leadership a little bit easier, particularly when you have to deal with something very challenging. And number two, it's hard for people to bash you when they know you on a personal level. So that's what I would say to you. What was the second one? My favorite Tri-C memory. Gosh, I got a lot of them. I tell you, my favorite Tri-C memory was when we opened the campus center at the Metropolitan campus. And let me tell you why. When I was there, that campus was probably 25 years old. But the campus center was abysmal. I hated it. And I tried hard during the 11 years that I was there to get it changed in some way. I was always told that that's not going to happen, right? But then when I came back and saw that we had an opportunity to invest a significant amount of money in that center, that was a major thing for me. And there were I always said that if I ever came back as a college president, there are two or three things that I would do. Number one, I would tear down that campus center and build a brand spanking new one. And I would move our engineering technology programs out of the basement at Metro into their own separate facility. And we were able to do that partly through the bond, construction bond that we passed. And the other one was that we saved $40 million to invest in the Metropolitan campus center. That was a big deal. And when we cut the ribbon on that bad boy, oh, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. How many of you been at the campus center at Metro? It's a beautiful, beautiful facility. How many of you saw the old campus center in comparison? A couple of people, yeah. So I wish I had photos to show you side by side, but it's a beautiful thing. And the plazas, when I was president there, we would spend $2 to $5 million every year correcting the damage that would occur when the expansion joints, I learned a lot about facilities, the expansion joints would freeze. And if you were there before the plazas were redesigned and reconstructed, all of the concrete had buckled, so much so that it was dangerous. So those plazas now beautiful as well. And that community essentially developed right before my eyes, because right across the street from the Metropolitan campus was some housing developments that had stood since 1935, and they were not in good condition, and certainly, from my vantage point, not habitable. And that was changed. You remember Old Cedar? And then on the other side of the gymnasium was, what was the other one? On the other side of the gymnasium, gosh. It was, I forgot the name of it, but now it's beautiful housing. And we just received some tax credits to build scholar housing designed specifically for single mothers with children who attend Tri-C or either Cleveland State University. So we're going to be building those, I think, in the foreseeable future. But my fondest moment was that. I mean, I got a bunch of them, but to me, that stands out because it was a dream I had, 20 years ago, and got a chance to see it happen.
Thank you, sir.
We have a question.
First of all, I just want to thank you. It was really awesome to hear everything that you had to say about leadership, obviously very inspirational. In this program, in our community engagement class, we read a book by Brene Brown, if you're familiar with her.
Yes, I am, yes.
Yeah, she is a social worker, author, researcher, and she talked a lot about vulnerability as an important quality in leadership. I know you mentioned some other qualities, but that's something that resonated with me.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering, like, what your opinion is on vulnerability and how is it a strength as a leader? Does it
Yes.
help you connect with
Yes.
your community, your faculty, and how has that played a role in, your time here at Tri-C and your success in leadership?
Yes, yes, and yes. I will tell you, when I first became a president, it was hard for me to depend on my personal qualities, to be quite honest with you. And that's one of the most important ingredients in my framework, the authenticity, the emotional intelligence. Those are so critical. And it's okay to be vulnerable. Just a minute ago, I almost teared up because I talked about Cleveland. It's okay. And people can relate to that because they see you not just as a leader, but someone whose goal is to ensure that the organization they are responsible for is successful. Not only in terms of these outcomes, but also in terms of the people you serve and also the individuals that work here. We just implemented our what do we call our 5 days? Our wellness days. And we implemented a flexible work schedule. And when I tell the other presidents about what we done, they said, "How could you do that? You lose control." No, you don't lose control. See, the thing about power, if you never have to use it, it builds up. If you never have to use it, you can become one of the most powerful people on earth. Not that I thrive on power, but I know that to be the case. But vulnerability, the ability to delegate responsibility to other people, the ability to form consensus, the ability to form a guiding coalition of people who you believe in. For example, another example, I met with our faculty leaders, right? And we were talking to them about the going with the mask optional. So my thing was, okay, we got to do it in intermediate steps. So, in the classroom, outside the classroom, no mask, inside the classroom, masking. And then in the summer, we would do masking in the classroom, no social distance. But they said, well, what do you take? I mean, that's confusing. Why are you doing it that way? And I said, well, how do you know that this is what people want? And they said, I get emails and emails, people talk to me. I don't have that link, that communication link, that engagement. And when they said that, I said, that makes sense to me. And we get questions all the time of when we're going to get rid of this crazy mask mandate and all of that. Well, May 15th is the date. So, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, and that quality is one that distinguishes the best leaders in the world, that level of vulnerability. I had an opportunity to interview Howard Schultz because he was thinking about a presidential run. And he called me and he said, I'm coming through Parma. Would you interview me so that I can talk about my new book? And I said I could. But I also want to ask you a question that you need to clarify for the nation, and that is the situation. He had an incident in Philadelphia at one of his Starbucks where a group of young black men came in, and because they lingered for a while, the manager called the cops on them, and they were arrested. So when Howard was asked about that, he said, I don't see color, which was the wrong answer. And so he said, yeah, I want you to because I want to clarify that. In a national setting, he talked about the mistake that he made. And he knew he needed to rectify it. And he did. He created this whole new program at Starbucks around diversity and inclusion. I forgot the name of the program. It wasn't that successful. But that's vulnerability. I mean, this man but he did it. He did it, yep. I think we got questions up front.
First, I would like to say congratulations. Your journey has been extraordinary, and being here today, listen to you is incredible. And I would like to know what is the most important thing that you have learned from the students during your time at Tri-C?
A bunch. A bunch. So much. A perfect example was at this campus, I was called to a meeting, an assembly and I didn't know what it was all about, of black males at this campus. And I walked into the room, they had suits and ties and different things like that on. And so they said, Dr. Johnson, we appreciate you coming, and we have a few recommendations for you. I said, okay, let me hear them. Well, one guy wanted a football team. I said, no, that's not happening. But they said, Dr. Johnson, what we'd like to do is a way to affirm our culture, but also to ensure that everybody else at the institution had an opportunity to learn and benefit from that. And I said, well, what are you talking about? They said, we want multicultural centers on every campus. And I said, okay. I said, but these multicultural centers can't not just be for you guys. They have to be open, and they need to give people an opportunity to really convey their understanding, to gain knowledge, and to give you a chance maybe to affirm your values. So as a result of that, we have multicultural centers on each one of the campuses. Each one of them are headed by a different organization. I think at Metro it's the Black American Council. At the Western campus, it's is it GSA or oh God. Yeah, but is it Gay Straight Alliance, or is it SOGI? It's SOGI. Mm-hmm. It's SOGI at the Western campus, and I forgot who is it. What? Oh, also the Hispanic Council at the Western campus as well, and I forgot here who. It's a combination. Yeah. So, yeah. So that, yeah, I listen all the time. And what I decided to do when I came in as president was to make sure that the students had a voice to the trustees. So we have student board conversations when we have our meetings on the campuses. And also, is it this head of the SGA that's on the board, or is that person elected separately? I think the board student scholar. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, the board student scholars, so they're on the board, and they give updates and reports to the Access Learning and Success Committee, and now they actually speak at the board meetings. And that voice is very, very powerful indeed. So, yeah, great deal. And I think the transition from being totally virtual to moving into more on-ground programs and services came as a direct result of the concerns expressed to me by students who feel that they're more comfortable in a physical setting than they are virtual. So a lot more of that in the fall.
Thank you, sir.
So I know you've heard this a lot today, and you're going to keep hearing it, but thank you so much for speaking with
you
us
got it.
today.
Not a problem.
So you talked about your entire journey throughout from where you started to where you are now. And I know a lot of us are hearing, it's college. You need to figure out what you're doing with your life.
Right.
Is there any advice you could give any of us just how we should kind of follow our own path to leadership, as you would say?
Yeah. Well, it's not about following your own path. So I don't want you to misunderstand that there is a certain level of knowledge and learning and understanding that you have to have as a leader. And I talked about them as the technical skills and qualities that you need. The ability to strategic plan, the ability to form a vision, the ability to assess that, the ability to run an organization through continuous improvement as opposed to change management, and the list goes on and on and on. But you can't be a leader without those other things that I talked about, the 3 essentials of leadership. That's your education, your experience, and your exposure. So education is beyond the formal stuff. It's about what you learn by associating with individuals in this room when you talk about ways that you comprehend or, how you understand particular material and things of that sort. The experience piece is not only your jobs, but it's also about the just the life things that happen to you and how you learn from that, okay? I talked about my experience in North Carolina. That's part of my experience base. And quite honestly, a lot of what I do, particularly around social justice, comes from that experience. And then exposure. There are people, if you know if you know about background experience, I'm really a combination of Walter Cronkite. How many of you have ever heard of Walter Cronkite? Okay, old school. This guy named Bill Friday, who was the president of the University of North Carolina during the time that they were desegregating it. And the third person is, Louis Stokes. Formidable individuals that I have tried to emulate. Walter Cronkite was trusted. He was trusted. He broke the news of President Kennedy being assassinated, and he did it with such grace. He was trusted. Trusted news reporter, ever, probably the most trusted ever. William Friday was smart. He took a segregated system of higher education that was under pressure by the federal government to desegregate. And he used those skills to accommodate the needs of his state and the needs of the federal government through a consent decree. And because of Bill Friday, North Carolina has the best higher education system in America. They still maintain their historically black institutions, which are integrated completely. And he was able to keep those historically white institutions that accommodate the needs of everybody in that state, and he was fantastic. Louis Stokes was a gentleman. He had a demeanor about him that when he walked into a room, you knew he was in charge. And I got a chance to talk to him just before he passed away. And I talked with him about the idea of honoring his brother and developing a way that individuals can develop their leadership skills. And an outgrowth of that year-long celebration is the Cleveland Leadership Center has instituted this civic leadership program that's named in honor of Carl Stokes. And he said, I'm good with it, because one of the things that I regret is that we were so concerned about our own path, our own development, that we forgot to provide opportunities for individuals to come behind us. So the people that came behind them had no shoulders to stand on. And as a result of that, Cleveland languished following Carl Stokes' period as mayor. There was a lot of unrest and everything. So that's what we're getting back to. That's why you are so important. You're standing on the shoulders of these great community leaders now, and you have to make it possible for people to stand on your shoulders as well. So remember that you are not only concerned about your own growth and development as an individual, but you have to be concerned about the growth and the development of those folk that will come behind you. I'm good if you are.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, yeah, good afternoon, sir. It's a great honor getting to meet you in person. I would like to ask one question, which is, what would you like to be remembered for as your retiree, sir?
What would I like to be remembered for? Oh, my goodness gracious. Nothing. See, this is the thing. What I wanted to do, well, nothing. There's nothing virtuous about what I do, quite honestly. So much of what we've achieved is because of the collective engagement of individuals throughout the college community. And a lot of what we're experiencing now as a vanguard institution has come from the collective wisdom of a lot of different people. And that's what I'm appreciative of. So I want to be remembered as the 4th president of Cuyahoga Community College. That's about it. And I don't think that's a memory that you're going to be able to eviscerate. And that's all I want. I'm the 4th president of Cuyahoga Community College. I served almost 10 years in this capacity. And I served also as president of the Metropolitan Campus from 1993 through 2004. That's what I want to be remembered for, nothing else. Excuse me.
Do you still have
one.
any other question?
Right here.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So my question to you is, as you kind of alluded in different answers, you talk about the elements of leadership, but I would like to know what you believe is your greatest weakness in the last 10 years.
My greatest weakness in the last 10 years, let me count them. The first one was vanity, quite honestly. And when I became a president for the first time, I had to overcome that because there was a particular incident that embarrassed me and embarrassed this institution. When I arrived at the Metropolitan Campus, there was a lady who just passed away. Her name was Frances Franklin. And we commemorate her every year with an annual event, scholarship event. And so my secretary came to me, and she said, not my secretary, Betty Morgan, who we shared the same birthday. In fact, she was an extraordinary individual who's no longer with us. She came to me and said, they want you to be at this event, and it's to honor such and such, and they want you just to preside over it. And I said, okay, I will. And so I went to our records to pull out some information on Frances Franklin because I didn't know her that well. You know, we went around the, they were honoring her with the stone, the first stone in the Memorial Garden at Metro. And if you've been to Metro, there was all these stones that commemorated people in this little garden. Well, it started looking like a graveyard. So we decided to do one big piece, and that's the last will and testament of Mary McLeod Bethune, there now. So I go out, and the family is there, and they asked me to make opening remarks. And when I did, one of our counselors, Bob, what's Bob's last name? Patterson, took the paper, and he said that to me. And lo and behold, the person that we were supposed to be honoring was a long-standing counselor that had passed away, Eunice Johnson, not Frances Franklin. And I said, oh my goodness. So I thought, and I said, you know what? The same words that I used to describe the contributions of Frances Franklin can be applied to Eunice Johnson. And so I went on and extolled the virtues of Eunice Johnson. But vanity is probably the worst thing that can affect a leader. And a sense of greatness, so much so that it can actually be your downfall. And you can think about leaders throughout our history who that's happened to, right? I think the other piece is I like attention to detail, particularly during critical moments. That's not something that I've experienced, but just some leaders kind of have that as an issue. And I think the last piece is thinking more about yourself than you do about the organization. But the vanity one, I mean, I'd arrived, you know, here I was, I think I was maybe, in my early 40s when I took over at the Metropolitan campus, my first presidency, and I'm feeling good about what I'm doing. And this moment really was it was a rude awakening that I actually survived it. It may not have been a big deal, but for me it was. And it taught me a lesson that I will never forget.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Mm-hmm. Do we still have any other person that have any other question? Yes. Summer? All right. Okay. If we don't have any other question, at this point in time, we need to appreciate Dr. Johnson for sharing that moment with us. Dr. Jordan, this is my 6th leadership activity this semester, and apart from going to Alabama, I really learned a lot from this. I appreciate this moment. So before you come around, I want us to just rise up and appreciate Dr. Johnson. But you know, this might be the last. That will be having him here at the Mandel building, talking to us. But we still have him around often and often. But I want us to just rise up and appreciate Dr. Johnson for being here with us. And thank you. And I welcome Dr. Jordan.
very gracefully as that rolls all the way across the room.
Okay.
Thank you, Larissa.
All right.
Thank you so much, Olu. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, is this still on? Thank you, Dr. Johnson. We thought, in honor of the title of your first book, the best thank you gift we could give you is one of our own Jack Joseph and Mort Mandel Scholars Academy lapel pins.
Right.
But we do also have, as you probably noticed when you signed in, copies of Dr. Johnson's new book that we hope you will take advantage of and enjoy. And let me ask you one more time, a round of applause for our esteemed guest,
guys.
Dr. Alex Johnson.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for being here.